Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to On Trial, starring Mark Radulich, also starring Sean Comer. Hope you're ready, Hollywood, because you're on trial.
All rise. The Honorable Judge Fudge presiding. This is On Trial, and I am tonight your defense attorney, Mr. Mark Radulich. And we bring you a movie that, when it comes to people's opinions of it and critical viewings and such, it's a barrel of monkeys. It really is. This is Superman Returns, brought to you by Bryan Singer in 2006. And, of course, joining me for the prosecution, Sean Comer. How do you do, sir?
Miles Edgeworth for the prosecution, Your Honor. It's good to be back.
Yes, we took off for a month, rejuvenated, got ourselves re-energized, and we are ready to take on, this being a week where Wonder Woman got her just desserts. We thought we'd honor Wonder Woman and all the women out there by looking at yet another Superman movie. Had I really thought about it, maybe we should have done a TV party for Linda Carter's Wonder Woman series, but Superman Returns is one of those movies that made me want to do the show in the first place.
Actually, if you really wanted to have some fun with Wonder Woman properties, you could have gone that way. You could have looked at the iconic television series that inspired a generation of women to believe that yes, you really can grow up to become anything. Even the Spirit of Truth, the greatest of the Amazons, and a founding member of the Justice League. Or you could have just as easily looked up that tanked, absolutely awful NBC pilot that attempted to cast Friday Night Lights alum Adrienne Palicki as Wonder Woman and Elizabeth Hurley as, now I'm trying to remember her name. I almost called her Cat Grant because I've been binging season 1 of Supergirl the last few days. I can't remember her name. It's absolutely escaping me. If you want to do a short, fun tea party, I think that would have been the way to go.
Well, the obvious choice should have been the animated feature, Wonder Woman. I love ice cream. That's a great movie. But no.
Well, there's that, and your daughter has a fantastic rack. But again, yet another way you could have gone, where you could have talked about a good Wonder Woman property, or depending on how much you and Starcher and Ben have decided you hate yourselves, again, you could have watched the shit NBC pilot.
There's an Aquaman pilot out there, too, that would have been like part of the Arrowverse.
Wait, what? No, I wasn't aware of this.
Yeah, I was looking for Aquaman stuff to do for next year. I'm already, planning for December of 2018. And I found on iTunes the pilot to what would have been a CW Aquaman show.
Like a live action show?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Would have been part of the Arrowverse.
Well, it's a shame we even have to call it the Arrowverse, because right now I'm a few episodes into season 5, and already I'm finding myself veering right back toward, Arrow, why?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. Let's get back on track here. Superman Returns. It's one of those movies that made me want to do this show in the first place. I really wanted to look at movies that had a lot of critical disdain, a lot of fan disdain, and see what merits we could find in them. And Superman Returns was definitely one of those movies where the first time I saw it, I hated it, and I've had no love for it ever since. So this was an exercise in giving it a second chance with an open mind, knowing what I know about the movie now, and we'll talk about that in my defense. But first, let's go to Sean for some notes. What are our production notes for Superman Returns? And mind you, folks, get comfortable because the history of Superman on film deserves its own documentary.
Thank you, my almighty tallest. Let's start by establishing a little bit of a timeline, shall we? By the time Superman Returns hit theaters on June 21st, 2006, 19 years had elapsed since Superman 4 put a bullet in the franchise and sent it into a coma for 19 years. It had been in the intervening years about 10 years since the infamous successive debacles of John Peters engaging Kevin Smith to write the legendarily hilarious failed treatment Superman Reborn. For those of you who have never seen An Evening with Kevin Smith, this would be the one that theoretically was to include Superman without a suit, Superman never flying, and Superman fighting a giant metallic spider in the third act, because spiders are supposedly the most feared killers in all the animal kingdom. And by the way, also, the Fortress of Solitude was to have polar bear guards who would at one point battle Brainiac, and Superman was supposed to have a pet or sidekick of some kind at Peter's behest. This is what happens when you trust your comic properties to Barbra Streisand's displaced hairdresser, folks. But the most important one to me of all is the fact that by that time it had been 26 years since a Superman movie had actually been any good, a live-action one anyway. So at the time when this was fine, and by the way, I mentioned successive failures. To backtrack a little bit, the Kevin Smith, John Peters failure immediately preceded an attempted humping of the Superman franchise that would have, from all notes and history indicating it had been so hilariously egregious that it indeed did deserve its own documentary. I'm talking, of course, about the attempted Tim Burton epic Superman Lives, which was to anoint Nicolas Cage as the new Man of Steel. Yeah, that Nicolas Cage. Anyway, by this point, by the mid-2000s, Bryan Singer had actually first conceived of the story of elaborating on the fallout of Superman's return after a 5-year absence during the making of X2 X-Men United. And, of course, this wasn't exactly what you would call a bad idea, and Singer was a very hot director at the time. He was seen as having, despite not being a comic fan, a very appropriately artistic and dramatic touch with comic properties and superheroes. So, of course, this led to him being duly invited by Warner Brothers to pitch his little idea, especially since his concept would have completely retconned, eschewed, and ignored the last two terrible live-action Superman movies. And when he brought this idea before former Superman director Richard Donner and his wife Laura Schuler Donner, they both approved of the idea quite warmly. No doubt because he was probably ashamed to have had those two sequels follow the masterpieces that were Superman and his original cut of Superman 2. Warner Brothers received Singer's pitch in, let's see, according to my notes, just before he was to go on vacation in Hawaii with X2 writers Dan Harris and Michael Dougherty. Warner Brothers ultimately accepted, and the trio then spent their vacation writing a script treatment, which would eventually result in Warner's greenlighting the project, Mick G. Having his original project scripted by J.J. Abrams, Superman Flyby, dropped entirely, and seeing Singer fatefully drop out of X-Men The Last Stand and push back an as-yet never-made Logan's Run remake. As a result, pre-production began in 2004. By February 2005, Harris and Dougherty had burned through 6 drafts of the script, including several that contained eventually removed 9/11 references, and shooting began in late March 2005 under the working title Red Sun. Ha fucking ha. Of course, since by this point there was no conceivable way of casting the original principal performers from the first 2 Superman movies, namely because Christopher Reeve had tragically passed away after years of declining health following a horseback riding accident that left him wheelchair bound for the rest of his life. Margot Kidder undergoing a very, very unfortunate mental breakdown, and Gene Hackman just being, really too goddamn old by that point to really play Lex Luthor. Brandon Routh was ultimately recast as the Man of Steel, with the full blessing of Reeves' widow, nonetheless. In fact, she is often noted as having been awestruck by Routh's resemblance to Reeves' physique after undergoing a rigorous bodybuilding program in order to get in shape and don the famous blue and red tights. Kate Bosworth was cast to fill Kidder's shoes as Lois Lane, in part because she had been so impressive, actually starring alongside Kevin Spacey in Beyond the Sea, playing Sandra Dee to his Bobby Darin. Wait, Bobby. I feel like I'm gradually losing my sanity. I almost said Bobby Darin, but no, that is not right. Kevin Spacey did not play the "Don't Worry, Be Happy" guy. No, it was. You know what? No, actually, that's my fault. I just mixed up Bobby McFerrin and Bobby Darin. Oh, Jesus fuck. This is what happens when I disappear off the face of the earth for about 6 weeks. And that would be because Spacey, himself a former Singer collaborator and Academy Award winner, thanks to his role in The Usual Suspects, was tapped to play what has become, again, in my opinion, alongside Clancy Brown, the quintessential Lex Luthor. And also sprinkled throughout the movie, we have the likes of James Marsden as Richard White, Perry White's nephew, a younger Sam Worthington playing Jimmy Olsen, Kate Bosworth as, I believe she played Lana Lang, didn't she?
Kate Bosworth?
Or not Kate Bosworth, Parker Posey.
She plays Miss Kitty.
Miss Kitty. I'm sorry, I've lost my notes entirely here. But overall, it looked fair. It looked fairly promising. Warner Brothers sank an absolute mint into promoting it, however, and that's no small reason why, on a budget of $204 million and making $391.1 million at the box office, by the time you factor in what had to be a bonkers advertising budget for this, it obviously was a tremendous financial disappointment to Warner's, and it was a bit of a low point at that stage in what had been a renaissance of comic book movies. You keep in mind, by this point, by the time we were getting a fifth live-action Superman movie, in the intervening years, we had seen a grand total of 5 live-action Batman movies, 3 of them actually good, 3 X-Men movies, 2 of them actually any good, 2 Spider-Man movies, and Spider-Man 3 was, in fact, about a year even to follow after Superman Returns. So it was an interesting time to be a comic fan because it was also several years away from the launch of the MCU, which would really kickstart everything that we enjoy every summer today. It was still a few years away from The Dark Knight absolutely exploding and becoming heralded as easily the greatest comic movie of all time. It was even a number of years before Warner Brothers Games would really tap into the Batman Arkham franchise and really pump some serious lifeblood into the DC name while they continued to try to get the live action movies right. So this one, again, much like Superman 4 did, it ultimately killed the franchise for a number of years. And the next movie we would get would be Man of Steel, which, much like this one, which I believe rates a solid C right now on Rotten Tomatoes, is, despite having a very average middle-of-the-road score, it's a bit polarizing. You have people who declare it an abomination unto the franchise, and some would say it's on par with Man of Steel, and they're not entirely wrong. And you have some who say, no, it's a really good Superman movie. You just don't get it. You just don't like it because it doesn't have enough action. It was very thoughtful. It was very smart and dramatic. But whatever you think, it's a thing that happened. In the words of Damien Dark in season 4 of Arrow, well, that happened. And it obviously failed on a number of levels that I get the feeling Singer didn't quite expect it to. And ultimately, had things gone a bit differently, we might have seen a whole new multi-film franchise that was in fact led by Routh instead of Henry Cavill. Who's to say that we would even be currently witnessing up until Wonder Woman, the ridiculous, unnecessarily grimdark DC universe that's unfolding today. But unless you have anything to add, aside from some things that I'll definitely get to in my prosecution, that's the story of Superman Returns and why we wish he had stayed gone.
All right, a quick plot synopsis. I won't spend too long with this, but the gimmick here is that Superman's been gone for 5 years. He went to visit the remains of Krypton, and now he's back. And he finds that Lois Lane has won a Pulitzer Prize for writing something called Why the World Doesn't Need Superman. She's also engaged to Cyclops, and she has a son. Meanwhile, Lex Luthor, his new plot to give Superman his comeuppance is he's going to go to the Fortress of Solitude. He's going to steal those crystals of knowledge that Superman has, because if you throw them in water, like sea monkeys, as they say, they'll grow into land. And what does this iteration of Lex Luthor want, everyone? Land, 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 land. So he's going to wrap one of them in kryptonite so that if Superman goes there, he'll be rendered weak and easy to deal with, do away with. And that is exactly what happens. They throw the one crystal in the water. It creates a landmass that is made of kryptonite. Superman goes there. He's stabbed in the back and subsequently dumped in the water. He's saved by Lois and Cyclops. Prior to that, it is revealed that Jason, Lois's son, who up until this point was not revealed to be any relation to Superman, actually has superpowers when he throws a piano at somebody. Moving on. They save Superman. Superman then rolls up his sleeves, picks up the landmass, and launches it into space. However, he falls back down to Earth and goes into a coma. Lois whispers to him while glancing at Jason, and after which Superman comes back to life. And this I'm just going to read straight through. Acknowledging that he has a much greater responsibility than himself, he recalls Jor-El's last speech to Jason as he sleeps. Lois starts writing another article titled "Why the World Needs Superman," and Superman reassures her that he's back to stay, and he flies off into space where he gazes down at the world. All right, let's do this. Prosecution, if you will.
Thank you, Your Excellency. You know, the reasons why this movie failed are both puzzling and a bit shameful. They're puzzling because if you look at the director alone, it's a man who knew better. He had already demonstrated with the first two X-Men movies a natural penchant that defied his dearth of a real sincere comic fandom in his heart by successfully diving into the source material, understanding it, and translating the heart and soul of it onto the big screen with great aplomb, tremendous gravitas, and, you know, his hands firmly rooted in the heart and soul of his characters and everything that made them so beloved in the first place. You can look at the fact that he manages to pull together multiple successful X-Men storylines in X2 into a cohesive, adapted narrative that stands up as well today as it did in theaters, you know, more than a decade ago. So, in a sense, you look at this and wonder, Bryan, Mr. Singer, so you wanted to tell a story of Superman returning to Earth after a lengthy absence, and what became of our planet without its man of tomorrow. You know, Mr. Singer, you do realize by this point that world without a Superman existed, right? You're aware of that, aren't you? Failing that, failing you wanting to write a good story about life without Superman, Dan Jurgens had at one point killed him off. And we got a lengthy succession of stories about life without Superman. You could have told that. You could have beaten Zack Snyder to the punch and probably gotten Doomsday right. You could have given us the live-action Doomsday that we deserved. But you didn't. You instead tried to write it your way, and somehow something went badly wrong, despite your having conceded that Richard Donner's Superman 2 was a huge influence. I'm not sure how you watch Superman 2 and get this. It's, and by all means, ready your Princess Bride jokes as you will, inconceivable. It's it seems downright impossible. It's like the fact that Train lead singer once said in an interview that he set out to write an In Excess song, or a song that sounded somewhat, as he put it, in excessy, and the result was "Hey Soul Sister." In the words of one of my favorite online critics, Todd in the Shadows, to paraphrase slightly, that's like trying to make scrambled eggs and instead you come down with gonorrhea. How does that level of failure even exist? And it's even more amazing when you consider that, almost in spite of Singer, a few things actually went right, with no help from him whatsoever. And that's the fact that Brandon Routh, credit where it's due, was a pretty damn good choice to be Superman. And in fact, it was his second time around going for the part, because he auditioned for and came up short to play a young Clark Kent in Smallville. This time out, it bears noting, the only one that he had to beat out was the kid who played Colossus in X2. Something Cudmore. I'm forgetting the first name. Daniel Cudmore. I think. Yeah, Daniel Cudmore. That was his main competition to get to play Superman. Was, he had to beat a bit player in one of Singer's previous movies. So that was an excellent choice. That was a good call right there. Lois Lane, slightly less so, because, especially when you consider that the list of people Kate Bosworth managed to beat out to fill Margot Kidder's shoes included no less than Claire Danes and Amy Adams. Oh, and Kerry Russell was in there somewhere too, who herself would go on to voice Wonder Woman in a thoroughly, thoroughly excellent DC Animated Universe movie that I strongly recommend you all check out the next chance you get if you haven't already. And then there's Kevin Spacey. Oh, dear God, I hate it when a bad comic movie includes such an excellent performance, because I want to say that I would watch this just for him, because he was deliberately ordered by Singer not to try to ape Gene Hackman, to take it in a darker, more vengeful, and diabolical direction. And, fuck me, sideways does he do it. This is the Luthor we've always deserved. This is the Luthor that should have been the template for what I wish we had gotten in Batman v Superman, as opposed to fucking Jesse Eisenberg. Because at least from a kind of a semi-movie nerd's perspective, I can at least watch this movie and go, it's Kaiser Soze as Lex Luthor. Awesome. Whereas on the other hand, I watch BVS and I'm forced to think to myself, I'm sorry. I know you've grown up since then, but I'm still supposed to be. I'm still supposed to believe that the Man of Steel and the Dark Knight are intimidated by the little wiener head from Adventureland. To kind of keep the references relevant, it's about what the Warner Brothers executives must have felt when, to put it slightly in Kevin Smith's words, they realized we just gave our multi-million-dollar comic franchise to the fucking Clerks guy. So you have all that going, and you have the fact that it's at least visually impressive. I have no choice but to give it that. It looks absolutely excellent. It's big. It's grandiose. It is larger than life. It's Superman, as I like to believe Richard Donner himself would have done it if he had today's filmmaking tools at his disposal. The only problem is it continues this succession of writers and directors who seem to want to make Superman movies without Superman being Superman. It's like I'm witnessing the genesis of the misguided notion that has now led us to, what are we up to, our 4th season of Gotham? It's because here we have a Superman movie where Superman never fights bad guys. We never really see him properly in action the way we all want to see Superman do his thing. With the lone exception of, because it's a Superman movie, just like how in a John Peters movie, you better bet somebody is going to fight a giant fucking metal spider. This being a Superman property, you bet your bippy that blue fucking Boy Scout is going to save a plane. It will happen. It's guaranteed. Death, taxes, and Superman is the enemy of all plane crashes. Holy shit, why do I get the feeling that was probably going to be a tie-in with the 9/11 references? Oh God, am I suddenly glad they took that out. But that's really about it. It is a Superman soap opera, which for those of you who watched Smallville, you know that that's quickly what that turned into and where that went bad. It's and then a positively abusive 154 minutes. God damn, to have that much time in a Superman movie go by and never really get that action-packed, heart-stopping moment that just makes you go, okay, now it's a Superman movie. That's utterly sadistic. I mean, it doesn't have to be total nonstop, slam bang explosion sequences the whole way through. But you never really get that. And then you throw in the whole stupid, oh my God, Superman made a baby with Lois and then ran off for 5 years, her storyline. Literally nobody cares. Basically what I gleaned from that is I was watching Little Snot-Nosed Superboy Prime. Okay, little slightly less snot-nosed Superboy Prime, but that's besides the point. It's like somehow nobody explained to Singer what a Superman movie is supposed to be, because we might as well have just titled this one "Everybody Hates Superman." And the unfortunate thing is, I can laugh at Superman 3. I can force myself to laugh at Superman 4, even though I know from my previous research experience on Long Road to Ruin just how miserable that filming process made everybody involved, including poor Christopher Reeve. But the sad thing about this one is it wasn't even comically bad. It wasn't even Batman and Robin. It was just 2 hours that you sat through and then you wanted to forget, and then unfortunately, the really sad part was you realized how depressingly easy it was to forget a Superman movie. I can at least remember Man of Steel because there were things about it that I liked, things about it that I genuinely enjoyed. I really liked Michael Shannon as General Zod. I rather enjoyed the sequence where Lois was being guided around by Jor-El to save her interfering ass. I enjoyed the final battle between Superman and Zod. It was damn sure a whole lot better than Batman v Superman. But this, I can't even tell you anything that really stands out to me other than, well, Kevin Spacey's performance just in general, and Spacey inventing the wrong meme. That's it. That's all I get from a Superman movie. And for all the great stories out there that could have been told, including stories about, you get Elseworld stories about what would have happened if Superman had done this or that differently. You've got, I don't remember if Red Sun had come out by this point or not, but you would have had that. You would have had What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way. You would have had, I don't even know if Kingdom Come was out by then. I feel like it was. I feel like I'm going to have to kind of research this while you're presenting your case and possibly backtrack. But you had other great stories that you could have told, but instead of trusting those writers, you just kind of went and did your own thing, and you proved that maybe in this one case you were a bit out of your depth, which, forgivable, these things happen, but you also really set the franchise back in a direction from which it hasn't yet recovered, but I hope that one day it can. And that is hard to forgive. Floor is yours.
Okay. The question on the floor to put for the jury, is this a bad movie? What is a bad movie? Bad movie is badly acted. A bad movie looks terrible, shot poorly, shot incompetently, has a hard to follow or nonsensical or ridiculous plot. These are all elements of the craft. And taken one by one and applied to Superman Returns, I find the term bad wanting. Now, let me first, before I get into the different craft elements and tell you how great they are, let me address the accusation that the film is boring. This annoys me, because what bores one man doesn't necessarily bore another. Some would say the Godfather movies are boring. Some would say the first two Superman movies are boring. If I were to play Superman 1 for my 6-year-old daughter and then play Batman and Robin for the same 6-year-old daughter, she would tell you, and her opinion counts, that Batman and Robin is a better movie. It was much more fun for her to watch, and that the first one put her to fucking sleep. So boring is completely subjective and has no place in critical analysis. I hear it all the time, and I'm not just attacking the prosecution. I get this from red letter media all the time. Oh, the film was fucking boring. Yes, it was boring to you, and I'm sorry if you've got ADHD and couldn't handle it. But some of us sat through the wedding scene of The Deer Hunter, and it changed them. It changed them. In any case, getting back to Superman Returns. The film looks great. Metropolis looks fantastic. Bryan Singer certainly has an eye for visual direction. The scenes themselves have a personality, all their own. Costuming, everything about the film's visual look is right up there. Should be right up there with some of your favorite movies. It looks phenomenal. Even the prosecution said Brandon Routh does a great job being the spiritual successor in his performance to Christopher Reeve. He's got the look. He's got the look. He's got the body. And in a movie that is supposed to be the spiritual sequel to Superman 2, he absolutely picks up the strands left by Christopher Reeve. He absolutely makes you believe that all the 19 years later, we are still watching the same performance. And that's a credit. That's a credit to Bryan Singer as a director. That's a credit to Brandon Routh as an actor. Kevin Spacey is phenomenal as Lex Luthor. More so than Gene Hackman, who very, very scene-chewing in his performance. Obviously better than Jesse Eisenberg. Kevin Spacey plays Lex Luthor as exactly directed, with that vengeance, with that malevolence. You say, not enough happens in this movie, but is there any bigger threat to Superman in this movie than Lex Luthor himself? A man who at the end of this movie will stab Superman in the back with a kryptonite shiv, Oz style. Okay? That's fantastic. Kate Bosworth, let's talk about her performance. Well, not exactly picking up the strands of poor Margot Kidder. Kate Bosworth had the unenviable task of portraying a Lois Lane who, despite having her memory wiped, plays a scorned, angry, frustrated Lois Lane. This is a Lois Lane whose the center of her world was Superman, and even after she has her memory wiped in Superman 2, is still finds herself attracted, not just, physically and sexually, but attracted spiritually to Superman. And she has to now play a character, Kate Bosworth, who has to live in a world where God has left her. The sun, the moon, and the stars have departed her world, leaving darkness. And Kate Bosworth, and the movie spends a lot of time with her wrestling with all those feelings. And she really does a phenomenal job of portraying that. I don't think she gets enough credit for struggling, for playing a character who's struggling with all of these emotions. So those cover the main performances. Let's talk about the plot. Hey, kids, do you like it when Superman saves people? You sure do. And as the prosecution even said, yes, he saves a plane. But he doesn't just save a plane. That is a phenomenal sequence. There's all kinds of things happening. I mean, that's a seat of the pants, edge of your seat, nail-biting sequence where the space shuttle drags the airplane into space, and he's got to, one, rip the space shuttle off the airplane and save the airplane from crashing and the whole 9 yards there. And they even do a bit of mimicry, a fun moment where at the end of it he does the whole bit, I hope this doesn't put you off flying, et cetera, et cetera. That's a great moment. And it should not be discounted because, Superman saves the plane in every movie. Yep, Supergirl did it too. It is identifiable with Superman as parents being shot in an alley is with Batman. But yet we keep seeing it. Why is that such a terrible thing? Should the movie apologize for its lack of action sequences? I don't think so. I think a movie that has you looking at the characters, their wants, their needs, their struggles, their frustrations, is a movie worth watching. Sure, we like to see Superman punch a few things, and we're going to get to that. Superman will eventually do something phenomenal and action-packed on screen again. But in the meantime, why not tell a story where you have these characters who for 5 years lived without Superman and now have to adjust with him back in their life, and him, conversely, having to readjust to living in this world that is frustrated with him. You know, there are people out there who think the latest Guardians of the Galaxy movie isn't as good as the first one because instead of it being just a sizzle reel of action sequences, actually stops and takes its time to tell you a story about characters and relationships. And oh, how I roll my eyes at those people, because this is why we can't have nice things. Superman Returns is not Man of Steel, where they destroy Smallville, and then they destroy Metropolis, with no regard to nothing. Okay? Man of Steel is borderline destruction-born. Made people very unhappy to begin with. Superman Returns, the spiritual sequel to Superman 2, is a thoughtful relationship piece. But you still want your action. So we'll give it to you. There's the scene where Superman, quote unquote, saves what's her face? Kitty, Parker Posey's character, Kitty Kowalski. No relation to Killer Kowalski. Where her car is quote unquote out of control. Actually, they really did cut the cut the brakes on it, so she was so it had to look real. There's the scene where he saves her, and then at the end, we have a scene where our hero, our titular hero, who is overpowered, and people sometimes struggle to find ways to really threaten Superman, is stabbed in the fucking back with a kryptonite shiv, Oz style. Dun, 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 dun. All right? How often do you get to see something like that on screen, where a god is brought to his knees and stabbed in the back and left for dead in the ocean? It's great. You want in your writing, you want in your movies for the hero to have tall enough hurdles for there to be tension. And considering they nearly kill the thing, they nearly kill the guy, I would say that's pretty tense. So I'm going to leave you with this one last thought. If you go into Superman Returns expecting it to be the kind of destruction porn that is Man of Steel, yes, you're going to be disappointed. But go back and watch the Donner Superman 1. That's not exactly an action-packed thrill ride, people. There's a handful of action sequences, but he doesn't punch anything there either. And, of course, you have the stupid ending of him going back in time after he can't handle Lois being killed. Yes, you have a little bit more punchy, you get a little bit more action in Superman 2 with Zod, but they gave him 3 Kryptonians to fight in that one. And it still has its slow moments. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, embrace slowness in movies. Let the actors act. Let the scenes germinate in front of the camera. You'll be happy you did. Your witness, sir.
Thank you, your muckety muckness. By all means, take things slow. Let the actors act. Let the tension build. But that's the problem. This movie hardly ever gets out of that first gear. It barely ever really escalates. again, that's the amazing part. I agree with you. The actual elements themselves, the ideas are sometimes superb. Yeah, the idea of Lex Luthor shanking Superman with a shard of kryptonite. Oh, that is indeed cold-blooded. And every time I put him up there with Clancy Brown's voice work, that's one of the first things I would point to. But the problem is, by that point, it's almost too little too late, because this thing is so overly wrong and filled with nothing that feels engaging, while it should really be at some point ramping up the stakes and the tension a little bit, that it just can't do much to save interest in what's going on by that juncture. It's not even that Luthor's actual scheme is a bad one. I mean, it's not like he, I don't know, that part at the beginning of Superman Doomsday, wherein he discovers the cure for cancer and then declares that he's going to keep it to himself, basically because, well, there's no profit in curing the disease. You know, it's nothing like that. And, you know, nor is it like the man is, you know, going about the school bake sale pillaging cakes. You know, it's not like we're watching an entire movie, and ultimately the ultimate end game of it is that the man stole 40 cakes. 40. As many as 4 10s. That's terrible. It's somehow even worse than that. It is worse than taking 4 10s of cakes. It is worse than the fact that is canon. It is, by that point, it's simply forgettable. Because everything that's transpired has somehow managed to achieve the impossible. It's given us very little reason to care about what Superman, the man of tomorrow, is doing. Because we spent the whole movie wrapped up in Supes might as well pretty much not giving really a fig about what Luthor is up to, because he's still so caught up in being jealous of Richard White and pining for Lois, and being a bit gobsmacked on the inside that Lois actually has a kid, and trying to reclaim his place in this world, both as Superman and as Clark Kent. And I can't state enough, those are not bad side elements to have along the way to add to the tension as character development. I'm fine with that. I really have no problem with it. But it's the fact that becomes such a central aspect of everything that's going on throughout the movie. And the fact that Luthor is able to get away with so much and put so much in motion because Superman is so distracted. There's really, in my opinion, not enough interaction between the two of them prior to that climactic third act. In almost any other movie, you at least get some escalation of tension between the hero and the villain. I mean, maybe it's not one epic Clash of the Titans fight after another, but you at least get a little interaction. You get a little bit of back and forth, and it just never feels like this has enough. And again, the most shameful thing about it is it's the right idea to take it and start slow and let things build. But it's another entirely to have it build and build and build and never really go anywhere. And you mentioned that the first Superman, the first effort by Richard Donner, it's not exactly an action-packed thrill ride. Well, no, but along the way, I would dare venture that you definitely get more action and more character development than you get in this one. And yeah, you know what? I am going to go ahead and kind of call on the whole Superman saves a plane thing, because no, you were actually right. It has gotten every bit as tired as Bruce us having to see at some point Bruce Wayne's parents get killed. At some point, someone has to tell Peter Parker, with great power comes great responsibility. And just at this point, we've seen it in the live-action Superman movies. We saw it in... We've seen it several times in Supergirl between the first and second seasons. Hell, Death Battle. Fucking Death Battle. Made fun of it in the first Superman versus Goku fight. That's kind of what a trope it's become. I mean, if anything, I liked Man of Steel just because Superman at least had to save the day in some different fucking situations. After a while, you kind of wonder why he doesn't just shorten the gap between his most frequent tasks and just ditch the Daily Planet to follow his lifelong dream of becoming an air traffic controller. I mean, at least it would make things a little bit more efficient. Or a TSA agent, perhaps. Because, or maybe a mechanic, so he could stop whatever keeps shooting the planes down. Hang on a second. I'm going to do a thing. Okay. Alexis, are you there?
I interrupted the podcast, didn't I?
Yeah, you did, and now you're on the air.
Sorry, I was calling to see if you'd handled some posts.
Yes. Actually, if you will go look at the Facebook page, you will see that I have tossed 2 of them up and scheduled another one to go up in about 30 minutes. But hey, while you're here, do you want to offer your thoughts on Superman Returns?
Oh my God, it's a surprise witness, ladies and gentlemen.
For the record, Mark, I am terribly sorry to interrupt. I just had to call my employee and make sure he was doing his job.
I told you I was multitasking, and I'm not done yet either.
Okay, well, honestly, yeah, Superman Returns. Really liked Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor. They were clearly going for a pre-crisis Luthor, something more similar in the vein to Gene Hackman as opposed to what we see with Clancy Brown in the Justice League TV series, for an example. I really enjoyed Frank Langella as, what's the name of the boss?
Perry White.
Perry White, thank you. I wanted to say Percy White for a second. I'm like, it's not Percy. Yeah, no, I really liked him. Big fan of the kid who played Jimmy Olsen. I've seen him in a couple other TV shows. I really like him. I was not a fan of the girl who played Lois Lane, but I think there's a little bit of a prejudice. Kate Bosworth, thank you. I think it was a little bit of a prejudice because virtually everything else I had seen her in, at that point she was playing either a high school student or a college student. So to see her playing Lois Lane, the adult Lois Lane, who's, a mother, it's like, no, she just looked way too young for the part.
They almost cast Amy Adams. Did you know that?
Well, you know what? I'm glad they didn't, because I think at that time Amy Adams would have also been too young. I'm glad she's playing Lois Lane now. I think she now looks age appropriate. I really like Brandon Routh actually as Superman. He also looked a bit young, but there was a charm to him that I really liked that we saw with Christopher Reeve, the ability to play the lovable goofus of Clark Kent and still have a very stoic feel about him when he played Superman.
He kind of brings that to seemingly every role he plays, except maybe Dylan Dog.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The guy who played Jimmy Olsen was in Dylan Dog too. No wonder I like him so much. I loved him in that movie. I did like him. I wasn't a fan of the ending. I just felt it was a little haphazard cut and paste together. But maybe I'm also kind of spoiled with superhero movies. I was expecting something a little more epic of a showdown, not just Superman gets saved, then he goes back and then he pushes the island into space. It just sort of seemed meh. Kind of anticlimactic. It
was kind of easy mode. It was
yeah.
With the exception of, and I'll agree with Mark on this, him getting shanked by a chunk of kryptonite.
Oh yeah.
Which might go down as one of the greatest non-comic Lex Luthor moments of all time. But no, that's the thing about it, is it kind of, you almost wish there had been a little more of a struggle. That it had ultimately been a little bit harder than just covering the whole manufactured rock with soil and just sending it into orbit.
Don't get me wrong. It is refreshing to see I'll say, don't get me wrong. It is refreshing to see Superman at his weakest. There is something about seeing him push the kryptonite into space, knowing very well that that's poisoning him. And I think there is something to it. But again, I was still hoping for more of an epic ending. That I think you take a look at the first two Superman movies. Those were epic endings.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me.
Interestingly, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
Let me throw this out there. And I get the whole idea of there should have been a final showdown, but conversely, how many movies have we seen where the third act villain is some sort of video game monster that had no bearing on the rest of the film, was pulled out of the ether and presented just to satisfy that itch, whether it be Doomsday or the Abomination, or a half a dozen other just random monsters or whatever, just to fight the good guy so that you have a satisfying ending. This was trying to do something a little bit different. Whether it succeeds or fails, I think, is a legitimate question. They were setting up Lex Luthor through the entire movie as Superman's main adversary. And Lex Luthor is a regular human being with who can't fight Superman in a one-on-one fight. He has to somehow level the playing field, which he did, and Superman had to overcome that hurdle. I think it actually would have cheapened the movie unless Lex Luthor got into the BattleTech outfit that he has in some iterations and actually tried to fight Superman. I think it would have cheapened everything they were trying to build up at Lex Luthor by having Superman fight anything else. Just my personal opinion.
It is interesting because I remember, Sean, when you and I saw Superman Returns for the first time, one of the comments we had was that while we did enjoy Kevin Spacey, we were both kind of slamming our heads on the desk going, why do they keep going back to Lex Luthor?
Yeah, that's another factor, is the fact that it suffers from Luthor fatigue. You wouldn't have had to have gone with an entirely other villain. You could have worked Luthor in there, but I've said a number of times over the years, Darkseid, Brainiac, Mongol, so many other villains you could have gone, even besides Doomsday, who is... He's deservedly one note in the way that that people keep misportraying Bane.
Very much so.
Yeah. So many others you could have gone with. Or you could have gone really deep cuts and gone with someone like, say, Maxwell Lord, Metallo, Amazo. So many others that have never really been tapped into.
Not going to lie, I am dying to see Brainiac in a DC movie. He's one of my favorite villains.
Yeah, I've wanted to see Brainiac for years. And
you saw Superman 3 features Brainiac and Bizarro.
Don't speak of
Shut
that.
Up,
Superman 3 is the best Superman movie ever.
Well, hell, I'll throw this out there just because he's another one of my personal favorites. As long as we're making a movie that is supposed to basically pick up just about right after Superman 2 and just pretend that 3 and 4 never happened.
We'd all like to pretend that.
Yeah.
Not
why
me.
didn't we maybe just incorporate both Luthor and some kind of rematch with Zod? Why didn't we do that? That would have been great.
Yeah, not going to lie, I really did enjoy Zod in Man of Steel. I actually thought that was a really well done villain.
I love Zod because he's an equal to Superman on so many levels. That would have been a tremendous inclusion, but instead, it feels forgettable in part because it's so formulaic in terms of the fact that it's the very same general premise of Superman that we've seen so damn many times, and that is Superman, Luthor. Luthor comes up with plan, manages to briefly get the better of Superman. Superman still manages to gain the upper hand in the end. And in this one, Luthor even gets stranded on basically a desert island. I mean, how damn Silver Age can you get?
I think he just described a John Cena match. No, actually, because the difference being, as Cena has proven the last couple of years, when he wants to, he actually can do something different. Whereas, the one thing, and I hate it, it makes me sick to my stomach to say that there's any even remote superficial upside to Heath Ledger's tragic early death, but at least we only had one Batman movie that focused on Batman and the Joker. Agreed.
Yeah. At least from there, they pretty much had no choice but to go forward with a different set of villains.
So playing devil's advocate here, let me defend the Luthor choice and nothing else. Luthor as the villain and nobody else. They obviously were going out of their way to make this, as I said in my initial defense, and I was dead serious about this. This was a relationship movie with Superman characters. This wasn't necessarily a Superman movie with relationships. Okay, they were telling this is, in a lot of ways. There's a lot of similarities to Ang Lee's Hulk in this, where there was a
no wonder
theme.
I hate it.
Agreed, but I think thematically, they were going for a specific story that they were wanting to tell with these characters and their relationships, and they didn't want it to be just fight scene after fight scene. If you start throwing in other villains with Lex Luthor, again, you're taking and I'm just looking at the finished product here. This was the question I posed to Robert Winfrey when we talked about Age of Extinction. If you're gonna start adding to this movie, or if you're gonna cut something, what do you want to cut? Now, Alexis, you said before. Sorry, let me say it right. Alexis, you said before. The ending kind of goes. The ending kind of goes on forever, and agreed. I think if that's my one standing complaint is after he falls to Earth, it seems like the movie goes on for another hour with him in the hospital. And it's like, oh yeah. And then it's just like he just wakes up and then kind of whispers to the kid while he's sleeping, and the movie ends. Like, So I'll grant you that. But other than that bit, what do you want to cut from this movie? Because ultimately you're cutting into the relationships if you start throwing in Metallo or Bizarro or any one of these other characters. I'm not saying that there isn't a way to rewrite this in a way to have both, but the movie as it stands right now is a finished product. If you were to cut something and put in some of these ideas you guys have, what do you want to cut? Do you want to cut some of these really interesting and juicy scenes of Lois exhibiting her frustration with Clark? Because I don't. Those are the scenes that were the most important in the movie, because it's not a Man of Steel where it was scene after scene of them destroying the Earth, which is not a bad thing. I like my destruction porn as much as anybody, but it was we're talking about two different kinds of movies.
Well, Spider-Man 2 managed to do it.
I know exactly what to cut. Cut out James Marsden and that whole Lois is married with a kid storyline, because frankly I thought that was stupid.
Okay.
Yeah, does that?
I'm not going to fight
as I asked Mark, does that basically make the kid Superboy Prime?
Oh, God help us.
What was Bryan Singer's direction to that poor kid? Hey, I'm going to need you to stare in wonderment at the camera. Do I have any lines? No. For the love of God, no. Look, we've already seen Jake Lloyd deliver lines on camera. No child should be talking in these movies. I just need you to stare.
Out of my head, you. That was exactly who I was about to reference, was Jake Bloody Lloyd.
Yeah.
But no, seriously, you talk about the relationships, but having Lois be married with a son does not really do anything to her relationship with Superman. Just have her be really mad and upset that he took off without a word, and she feels abandoned. And you want to get that she's seeing someone, yeah, get that maybe she's seeing someone. But, yeah, I would cut out the whole thing with Marsden. And I guess I'm kind of iffy on that part of the ending where he comes to save Lois. She's like, how did you get here? And he goes, I flew, because he's a pilot. And I guess they were trying to get to the whole not every hero needs superpowers thing, but I feel it kind of cheapens Superman, because he is supposed to be seen as the hero. He is the one who is supposed to save the day. It's like, oh, that's touching that he didn't need superpowers. He could go save his wife, but at the same time, it's like it just makes Superman look a little more pathetic.
I can't really disagree with any of that. The kid stuff I don't think really adds anything, except to say this: the whole point of having the kid and James and Cyclops, who is perpetually the other man, is it further hammers that Lois has moved on. That she did not stand around for 5 years pining for Superman to fly back through her window. She turned the page on her life. She had another man. She had this kid that she had to look after. She had a life, and it was divorced from Superman and his existence.
Agreed, but I think you got enough of that with the Pulitzer Prize-winning article, Why the World Doesn't Need Superman. I felt that seeing that alone and hearing she was getting the Pulitzer for it, I thought that drove home the point well enough.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that a rewrite of this film doesn't, you can't incorporate some of your ideas. My point was, as a finished product, what do you cut? Okay, we'll cut the kid. I agree. I think if you cut the kid, and maybe you tighten up some of the other stuff where Superman's in the water and all of that, and they have to save him and blah blah yakety schmackety. Maybe there's room in there for Superman to fight a video game bad guy if that's what you really want. I think with the story they were telling, I didn't know how necessary it was.
I think there's also something that clearly meant to tie into the original too, and so much of that was paying homage to that. I mean, they even have the exact same theme music as the original movies. And I think they were a little afraid to stray further than that. You know, like, this isn't what, oh, God, shoot me. Director of the first two Superman movies.
Richard Donner.
Thank you. I think they were like, this is too much what Donner did. This is what Donner did. We should really try to stay true to his vision. They really wanted to make a movie that fit more of the Richard Donner mold. And I think that's also part of the problem. That kind of stuff was a little bit safer back then when Superman first debuted. It's like, we're an older, more experienced audience now. We need a little bit more out of that. Do you honestly think that if the first Superman movie came out today, it would hold up?
No. I said that to Sean before you came on. I said, if you played the original Richard Donner Superman versus Batman and Robin for my 6-year-old, I know for a fact she's going to like Batman and Robin. It's colorful, it moves fast, it's fun. She thinks Poison Ivy is the greatest thing ever. You know, the only Superman movie she's ever seen from start to finish is Superman 3 because it's the best, but also because but for her, you know, it moves at a pace that she can tolerate. If I tried to play for her the Donner Superman now, she'd want to throw herself out the frickin' window. To your point, and I wanted to mention this before, Alexis, this was absolutely trying to be the spiritual successor to the Donner films. And again, I think with, you know, that it had the unenviable task of having to move the goalposts with Superman with a new audience, but also having to be enough of a soft reboot of the Donner films. And that's a tall order. And I think that throwing a lot more characters in there makes the thing potentially muddled. That might have been, I think, at least the thinking was, hey, we just want to reboot this thing. We want to get. I mean, we're talking, you know, almost 20 years later after the first Superman comes out. At this point, they're just trying to wipe the dirt off of it. So I think the thinking with this was, let's get a working Superman on film. Let's get all the characters that we know and love from the Donner franchise, and then in Superman 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we can bring in this. You know, we can bring Brainiac in, even though you already had him in Superman 3. You know, you can bring in all these. You can bring in all these other characters that we've been asking for, you know, since time immortal.
See, but the big difference is, my opinion is, at the time when they made the first Superman movie, we had not seen very many of what we know today as the quintessential pivotal Superman arcs. The ones that really changed the character, not just in terms of power, but in terms of everything on the inside too. Most of what you had to mine at that point was, in fact, you know, campier Silver Age stories. That was what you had to work with. But since then, we've had all the arcs that I've mentioned at various. And I apologize that I got the name of one where I called them Whatever Happened to the Man of Steel. It's Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. I apologize for getting that wrong. We had All-Star Superman. What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way? World Without a Superman. Red Sun. Kingdom Come.
Two of my favorite comic books.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, you have such a different Superman to work with, and a lot of those storylines are the ones that the people who went to see Superman Returns, those are the ones that they grew up with. Less so.
Yes, but
Superman,
Warner Brothers executives hate comic books. We've said this time and again.
Yes.
Warner Brothers executives hate comics.
Well, yes, clearly. No shit, Sherlock.
Yeah, I think anyone who's seen Batman versus Superman or Suicide Squad will vouch for that.
Yeah, every movie on the opposite side of Wonder Woman has conclusively demonstrated that. In fact, it's a miracle that the Batman Arkham games were as good and as lore-driven as they were. But it still doesn't change the fact that you have so much of a different, deeper, more interesting Superman to work with. Not just in terms of the character, but in terms of the tone of his stories. And instead, Bryan Singer, for as much as I love that he paid so much homage to Donner, I think it was very sweet, and I like that he tried to stay as true to the visual style as possible. He took these giant steps backwards to these movies that, well, the most you can say about them is, story-wise, we didn't know any better. It's just that this was the Superman that we knew. This was what we had to work with. We hadn't been through Crisis on Infinite Earths yet. We hadn't been through Death of Superman and World Without a Superman and the other Crisis stories and whatnot. We didn't have that. So it felt like going back to the Donner versions was really taking the mythos and the character and everything that we could have had and really selling it short by kind of taking the easy way out. So that's about all that's left that I've kind of got to say about Superman Returns. And Alexis, I'm semi-sorry that I dragged you into this, but then again, I've been warning my friends for years. You call me during a podcast. One of these times I'm going to put you on the air.
Well, it's actually interesting you guys are talking about Superman Returns because I actually had an interesting theory to throw your way about the upcoming Justice League movie. Which my dogs are barking at me for. Sorry.
We don't speak of it.
No, I'm assuming that we're allowed to say spoilers for Batman versus Superman, right?
Go ahead.
Yes, if you haven't seen the movie by this point, no, go ahead.
Okay, I was talking on a Facebook board about the Justice League trailer, and I commented how interesting it is that they are really going out of their way to hide Superman. Now, I know that he, quote-unquote, died at the end of Batman v Superman, which, I'm not going to rant on now. But we know he's obviously coming back, and I think it's really interesting how well they're hiding him, how they're not giving any clues to his reveal whatsoever. And I was talking about it, saying, I'm really hoping for a great, badass entrance out of him, because we know he's going to be in the movie. But somebody put out an interesting theory. They said, what if the reason we're not seeing him along the trailers is because they're going to pull the arc where Darkseid, or Steppenwolf, who we know is the confirmed villain for Justice League, has brainwashed Superman. We're going to go with that arc.
It's a good theory. And what I could plausibly see them using, because again, with all of these overpowered new gods on this, Flash, Wonder Woman, Samoan Aquaman, I can see them asking the question, who's powerful enough to take on all of these entities and really give them a struggle? Well, why don't how about if we made Superman evil? So I could see that.
Now, there is a really great story arc where Darkseid completely brainwashes Superman and forces him to do his bidding. The series finale of Superman the Animated Series covered it very nicely.
Yeah. I still say if you're going to do an evil Superman, I would really rather they just convert the main plot of Injustice and just find a way to do that.
I'm waiting for an Injustice movie, especially with the way Warner Brothers is. I could absolutely see that happening.
I pray that one day we finally get enough of a string of good DC movies that happens.
I am all for that, especially since I've been playing Injustice 2, and I love it.
Well, Alexis, I always appreciate you being on, so that at least then my daughter won't say that all my podcasts suck because I don't have enough girls on. So anytime that you're on, I can at least say, look.
Oh, I am sorry I interrupted. I apologize. I was calling just to talk about a couple of posts with Sean, and yes, shoot the Superman series, because I thought it would be interesting to hear his thoughts on it. But you know, I'm always happy to come on the show. I love talking with you guys.
We'll talk in a few minutes.
All
All right.
right. So with that said, I believe our trial here has come to a close, and I win. No.
Zod always wins.
That's right, goddammit. All right. Next week, we will be looking at the Flashpoint comic on source material. There'll be a TV party on the 13th of June where we'll look at Flash Season 3, otherwise known as Flashpoint. I am Sam Malone, and I am leaving cheers to the Kirstie Alleys of the world, Jesse Starcher and Robert Cooper, because I will be at U2. They will be handling the duties of Metal Hammer of Doom. They're going to review Unleash the Archers. And then Sean is back. Yes, Sean is back 2 weeks in a row. We take off for a month, and then I won't leave him alone. This time it'll be a TV party tonight for Orange is the New Black Season 5. Woo! And then the next time we will be doing an on trial will be July. Well, actually, before that, we'll be doing a TV party tonight for the gal that brought you Weeds has brought you another series on Netflix about the gorgeous ladies of wrestling. That's coming out. We'll do a TV party tonight for that on July 6th, and then the next on trial will be The Amazing Spider-Man 2, yet another misunderstood masterpiece. The following.
Wait. So since I prosecuted this time, am I defending that one, or oh no, I'm prosecuting again, aren't I?
I am keeping the schedule as I have it written, even with some of the deletions. So I believe. Hang on. I know I have it written down somewhere. Yeah. Let's see. I defended this time. I would have been prosecuting, which means I would be. You are prosecuting again on the 13th.
Okay.
Yay! You don't have to defend Amazing Spider-Man 2.
He insisted that he wanted to defend it.
Yep, but you do have to defend Planet of the Apes.
Which one? The Tim Burton one?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh. Eddie cries for you, Sean. Eddie cries for you.
Oh, that's okay. I will find a way to make that interesting.
And that's what we got in the coming up on the schedule. Sean, go ahead and do your plugs real quick, and then we're gonna get out of here.
You know what? This is the first time that I've been on the air in about a month and a half. While I've been having many a spectacular adventure all over the place. So I have nothing to plug except to go visit the Honeysuckle Rose Creations Facebook page. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Instagram. Join us on all of the socials where we roll out a whole plethora of beautiful, 100% upcycled, handmade jewelry every single month for the fashionable nerd, for the dapper geek. Everything from Scrabble tile pins, bobby pins, barrettes, and pendants to wire-wrapped dice, D20, D10, and so forth, hand-painted domino necklaces, and all kinds of things that we're coming out with constantly. And all summer long, keep an eye out for our announcements about which conventions we'll be peddling our wares at, hither and yon across the country. We've got a huge lineup with some major shows on the way soon as we get them finalized. We just came back from a huge showing at Phoenix Comic-Con. Great bunch of people, as expected. Tremendously fun week that myself and my good traveling buddy and sales tag team partner, Carrie Spiker, and I got a chance to meet. And otherwise, as far as other projects go, for the time being, that's about it. Just find me on the mini shows that Mark said I would be on. And otherwise, never dull your colors for someone else's canvas. And remember, don't steal 40 cakes. Don't. All right, that's 4 10s. 4 10s, and that's terrible.
Yeah. I thought the line was, and that's just awful.
Cut yourself off at 39 cakes. We will forgive 39. The moment you hit 40, no, man, because 40 becomes trafficking with intent to sell. That's misdemeanor to felony.
All right, thank you again to Alexis for coming on impromptu. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been On Trial. Be well, be safe, and behave. Court is adjourned.